What is happening, bunch of builders, and welcome back to the 1962 Ford Thunderbird Rescue. This car was parked roughly 29 years ago in a garage and forgotten. We got that big block 428 to fire to life, and we were able to drive this thing home. Yeah. And we need to address a few major things today. They're gonna make this thing much more roadworthy. Some cooling issues that we had on the way home, and one major suspension issue that gave this car the terrible driving characteristics that it had.
We'll wash and clean the inside and outside of the car.
And we've definitely got to get some exhaust on this thing. So one thing you'll notice under the hood here, we don't have a radiator. If you remember when we first got this thing going, we drained the water out of it, and that hose, the coil inside, completely rusted apart. Bought a replacement one, and that is this one. This is Gates right here. And for some reason, replacement hoses that you buy from the auto parts store don't have coils in them. And so what was actually happening, I had pulled the radiator, it was completely clear, flowed really nicely, put our hose on it, and that we have some really good water pressure down here still, completely sucking this thing flat. Went ahead and ordered from Larry's Thunderbird an OEM style hose. So you can see Fomoco there, C1, which would be 61, and there's that coil. Hopefully we'll have a good cooling system and we can continue to run this thing. Kind of what was happening is, as soon as it sucked it down, it would start scorching the water pump and squealing those belts, and we're trying to figure out what in the world's going on until we notice that right there. So let's get this reinstalled and let's get our radiator back in place. Well, you probably heard that belt is still screeching. And that is because if you remember in our first video, that water pump was pretty crusty, and I think the water pump is bad. Ooh. Yep. So that's what it is. Just the residual, probably from cranking the motor, the little bit of water that was in it pushed up in there on that first start so many years ago. Never ran again, and we have this nasty crust. Got our new water pump ready to go.
Gone ahead and got a new 160 thermostat. Now, factory would have been 180, especially with a big block here in the south where it tends to be warm during the summer. We want to run a 160. Now, with all that on the engine taken care of, everything sounding much better, smoother, no belt squalling, power steering working really good, we can really hear stuff. There's not much to hear because this exhaust is dead quiet. I think there's more exhaust coming out at the back of the manifolds than there is back here. One thing we need to address is we need to go ahead and drop the front of the exhaust off at the manifolds. Let's get new donuts put in there. We have a fire-breathing 428 Ford big block that makes no noise. We gotta liven this thing up a little bit.
Looking under here, you can see those factory style, really quiet mufflers. And the exhaust really isn't bad. And what's cool is, if you look down, hey, if you look down here,
It's got some funny welds, but it's not rust out, but it's also H-pipe. We can see some of the gnarliest looking welds I've ever seen, but it's solid. Probably an exhaust shop, honestly. Took the time to actually H-pipe this and everything. And so realistically, just taking care of the rear, this thing should sound pretty darn good. I'm excited to see how this thing's gonna sound. Not a huge fan of having the clamps right at the rear. That's just kind of part of the 60s, early 60s Ford deal, was having those clamps at the very rear of the car, but pretty happy with how they look. Real similar to the Galaxy, of course, other than we have a quite a bit different muffler and obviously quite a little bit bigger motor. Let's hear how this thing sounds now. It's got a good rumble in the car. And there goes the heater core. Wow, does that exhaust sound so much better and completely liven this car up. It does appear to maybe have a little bit of a cracked manifold maybe on this side, but that's one of those things it's pretty aggravating. We may drop it here sooner than later. If not, we'll change it out when we pull the motor, but for the time being, completely makes a huge difference in this car, and I cannot wait to hit the road in this thing. Now, with that being said, you may remember we had some issues there with our brake booster. The brakes work okay. They're not the greatest, but it's a over 4,000 pound car, and the booster was not working. When you actually hooked vacuum to it, it would completely collapse and lock the brakes up. Super, super weird. And that's because we need to put a kit in it. But what's really cool is, as you remember, we were able to take that one apart. So we're going to take it back apart, and we're going to put a rebuild kit in it and see if we can get these brakes working. And as you can see, this end and right here, the diaphragm is in perfect shape. But what we need to get into is in here. And that's basically it. So we got a kit from Harman Classic Brakes. And this should be everything we need to bring this booster back to life. Okay, it actually does come with this as well. One, remove the large C-ring that retains the rear seal adapter assembly. I don't know what that is. Driver net, be real careful. This is scary. All right, once that's loose, our assembly here comes out, and this is what we need to focus on, but we'll get all this cleaned up really good. We know this thing holds vacuum good, but for some reason the actuation part of it is funky, and I'm excited to dig in and see what is going on here. Whew, a lot of crust and corrosion in there.
goes there. See, this is where our problems are, I think. And then this was just floating around in here. I have no idea where that goes. So if you've ever been interested in what a booster looks like on the inside like I have, now we know. So it's got these little, almost like clutch forks, I guess, that actually actuate the whole dealio here. Yeah, this is definitely our problem. This guy right here is supposed to run in and out, and it is frozen. So basically what it is it's working, but as soon as it's showing the booster that the brakes are applied, which they are not. So we need to clean that up and try to get that thing out of there. All right, ended up having to throw it in the vise real quick to push down, but now we know our issue. So this right here is supposed to slide freely, and that is what applies and actuates your brakes. And look at that crust. So we just need to get this thing cleaned up really well. Every little bit of it. Got to remember to pay attention to that orientation, which I did not when I took it off, but thankfully we have the diagram that shows us. To where we're supposed to be. Then we have a new spring that replaces that old one. Drop this in there.
Along with those Taro brakes, if you remember in that video when we tried to drive this thing home, well, we did drive it home, we were able to make it. I was white knuckle steering this thing, and we thought, well, you know, we didn't have the power steering working, and maybe it needs an alignment, but it needed a lot more than that. When we took this wheel off, we noticed it was really chewed up, and let me show you why. I'm not sure if you can see, but the whole thing has slid. And so this is called your strut rod, I think is what it is. And if you can see down in there, there is no grooves left. So I'm not sure if you could tell, but basically what it had done with it like that is had allowed this whole wheel just to slide way back and just drag. I mean, it was just hanging out to the side and dragging. It couldn't come loose, so it's not like it was something that we could have, you know, the wheel would have fallen off, because I mean, this is still good and tight, but it just made it really hard to keep this thing straight. What in the world? Oh, wow. That bushing is completely gone. There we go. So here's the replacement side of our parts car. Now this is, the parts card is 64, but as you can see, they use the same one from 61 to 65. But look at the difference. Nice, pretty, stout grooves. This one, nothing. I don't know, find somewhere on the car and then measure to the spindle or something. So what we're
I can measure to the bumper.
Oh yeah, like the bumper straight. I see the big old buckle in it right now. That'd be good enough, right?
17 inches.
So we're gonna get it close, and it might need alignment. And now it's wheel and tire time. Now instead of those goofy little 14s, we'll be going with these 15s. And it's time to break a tire. Someday we'll get a tire machine, but we like doing it the old-fashioned way. But a better set. I don't know if that's, what the crap is that?
I stepped on my own foot. You notice we went with black walls. It's because the most inexpensive white wall you can buy is like $400 a tire. So we're gonna try the old school way and put some portal walls on this thing. So what you do, you get this on here, we put this in place. Oh, and this set of tires, and they're 55,000 mile tires, were only like $230 from Walmart. So, for the full set. So this is gonna be the try. Hopefully it'll look good. A little unsure. Let's see if we can get this thing popped up on the bead. There she goes. Gotta show who's boss. You'll notice what happens once the bead pops on sometimes. That kind of flops. You can see it's not sitting quite right in there, so we have to make it even. And then you just whack it down in. There we go. I guess we got some big wide white walls for a fraction of the price. And honestly, even though we took wire wheels off, they were Keystone, really goofy looking wire wheels. And we thought about original Kelsey Hayes. Now the problem with the Kelsey Hayes, they're very rare, they're very expensive, and you can't run fender skirts on these cars. And this thing has to have fender skirts. It just makes the look of the rear end of this car. So what we came up with, we did some searching on Marketplace, and this is what we felt like was the best looking style hubcap for this car. So this right here is actually off of a 1966-67 Mercury Cyclone. This would have been similar to what would have been on your Galaxy stuff of that time. And in 14s, you could get this as an option. I think our Mustang had these very similar hubcaps on them. And so this will give us that Kelsey Hayes wire wheel look without being kind of tacky like the ones that were on here. When we first got this thing here, it did get rained on, and so that's where a majority of the dust went, but this paint is still just disgusting. This is all mousetrap. So if you know what they do is they kind of have their babies and then they run around, and this is poop and blood and guts, and that's pretty gross on paint. So it's raining today. It's a perfect day to pull this thing outside, get it wet, get us wet, get it clean.
Now I know it would be an absolute monster to try to get in here and clean this grill. Very orange, very grody. I don't have it. So what I'm gonna try is some aluminum brightener. Just hit everything. Oh wow. Look at that difference. Our main priority is the distributor, carburetor, generator. The rest will throw some degreaser on. And it will probably oxidize it just a bit. But obviously we still need to wax and buff and wax this car anyways. We knew just by looking at this thing that it was a pretty nice car. We obviously have the couple little rust bubbles and stuff there, but I think they were there when this car got parked because wow, has all those years in that garage been so good to this car. After all the dust and grime cleaned off of this thing, it's a pretty little car. Now with the exterior, the initial cleanup taken care of, what's not pretty is this interior. It is disgusting. Rat poop and pee, and obviously we have a floorboard full of coolant because this thing decided to kill the... Why am I brain farting? Yeah. Because this thing decided to kill the heater core, of course. So we are going to go ahead, let's throw some Gordon Lightfoot on and get the inside of this interior cleaned up. Yuck. Thankfully, it's holding most of the coolant. Pretty cool floor mats, though. Definitely want to see if we can't pull that back seat, because you know it's got nest underneath it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. cosmetic seat. Can't believe I didn't notice this. Check that out. I mean, how often do you see an original build sheet in a 61-year-old car? That is so cool. And because it's somewhat hard as far as getting the rest of the odors out of stuff like the back of these seats, this stuff right here, I bought at our local hardware store. You just kind of mist it on. In every car we've ever put it in, I don't know what it is. It neutralizes the odor, and we've never had it come back. As long as we keep mice and stuff out of it and it's good and clean, we've never had issues again with smell in a car. So any of your little spots like this, you can mist with this, just kind of damp it down a little bit, let it dry, and it neutralizes that odor as far as we can tell. Now jumping in, wow, so much nicer in here. Smells much better. We don't have that disgusting aroma that you get with having a bunch of mice. Now it's not perfect. We did what we could with the carpet. And if you notice, this is like a big multi-piece, really nice carpet set. I imagine it was probably a pretty expensive endeavor at one point of time. And so we did our best to save it. It does have some staining that's really in there that we were not able to get out, but it looks far better. It smells good. The seats are really nice. We have some mice chew spots. Not too bad though. We will need to address our door panels and the steering wheel, maybe a few other little odds and ends, but overall, really happy with the interior of this car. And with that being said, also the exterior, this thing cleaned up so nice just for initial wipe off. We do need to still do some buffing and some waxing. That's obviously pretty time consuming, but sitting in the garage for that long, other than the mice getting into stuff, this car was pretty well taken care of and hid from the elements, and it really does show. Now we jump in, we grab the key. This thing fires right up. That exhaust sounds awesome. Super happy with it. It's quiet in here. We're sitting here talking. It's got a nice little throaty sound. You can feel the cam in it and everything. Probably needs some tweaking and adjusting still. But with that being said, we're still in the break-in period, obviously, even though it's 30 years roughly difference. But I think it's time to go ahead and start cruising this thing. Click it in gear. eBay special sunglasses. We'll see how this thing does. Now, one big thing taking off, we can actually steer this car now. Not only that, but one thing that really made it a bit of a treat to drive, we have really nice power brakes now. I mean, this thing stops, I wouldn't say crazy fast, but it never did. This is a big, heavy car. She's got a little power. We actually feel like we can drive this thing now, but it really just goes to show you never know what's still tucked away in those garages, the barns, the sheds, even out in the field that can be rescued and cleaned up and brought back to life. Thankfully, this car didn't need a full restoration. It's a great candidate for it, but it's just an awesome driver. These cars aren't ridiculously expensive, but nice examples bring good money. This one isn't the nicest example.
We got it on a budget. We brought it back to life on a budget. We can enjoy it on a budget.
And that's a wrap. I really hope you all have enjoyed the rescue of this 1962 Ford Thunderbird. Now obviously the car is not completely done. There's a few little odds and ends that we're going to do down the road as we continue driving the car, and I'll be sure to throw that in some other videos. She is running well, she's driving awesome, and she's such a cruiser. I just want to thank everyone so much for following along as we bring these cars back. We really do appreciate it so incredibly much. It's so much fun that Dad and I have the ability to be able to do this full time now. And if you haven't already and you do enjoy these kind of rescues, these will it runs, these rebuilds, getting these cars back on the road, be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell to keep up with our newest content. But that will wrap it up. Peace out, and catch you all on the flip side.